Hello, and welcome to Gwinnett County Public Library. My name is Amy Perry, and I'm an adult services specialist here at the library. Thank you for joining our program, Addressing Challenging Behaviors. Our presenter is Rita Young. Rita is the owner of Rita Young and Associates, which provides support for people with disabilities through coaching, training, and project management services. Rita has also started a YouTube channel and a Facebook group called Real Talk with Rita, which focuses on supporting individuals with developmental disabilities. Please welcome Rita Young.
Thank you so much to the Gwinnett County Library System for inviting me. I really appreciate the opportunity to talk about this topic that doesn't receive enough attention. And so we're going to be addressing challenging behaviors in teens and adults with developmental disabilities. And I really like the word addressing. In my original presentation, it's survive and thrive dancing with challenging behaviors. So just a disclaimer here, this information is general and for educational purposes only. It's based on my lived experience. It's not meant for any legal, medical, or behavioral health advice. Please use your best judgment because you're the subject matter expert for your family member, and consult with a licensed professional in order to make the best decisions for your family. So again, a little bit about me. I work primarily in the space of helping systems, organizations, nonprofits with positive outcomes, create positive outcomes for people with developmental disabilities, their families, and the systems that serve them. Through coaching, training, as Amy said, project management, and family and stakeholder engagement. You are welcome to join the Facebook group called Real Talk with Rita, or you can catch a archived set of interviews related to adults with developmental disabilities and how to support them on YouTube. And you can also email me, and my email address is listed there. So as a trainer, I've been a trainer for a number of years. I found this quote about a year ago. And so I'd like to encourage you, whatever you hear today, adapt what's useful, reject what's useless, and add specifically what is your own. So we call this addressing challenging behaviors. Dancing with challenging behaviors is another way that I think about this too. And why in the world do I say dancing with challenging behaviors? This is hard stuff to go through. Dancing implies a playfulness. Dancing implies some curiosity. And while we are in sometimes some incredibly trying and challenging times, if we can perhaps move in that direction, it will help in many areas. So we're dancing with it as we dance in relationships. We do that dance of relating to others and trying to figure out the best way to support all involved. Now, when we talk about challenging behaviors, this is how I'm defining it for this particular presentation. And again, the best or the target audience for this group would be teens and adults with developmental disabilities such as autism, cerebral palsy, intellectual disability, etc. So for the purposes of this presentation, challenging behaviors might be physical and verbal aggression, self-harm, property destruction, behavior that interferes with the activities of daily living and community life. And this could develop in adolescence and adulthood, although sometimes it develops prior to that as well. So our discussion today, we're going to be focusing on some possible causes of challenging behaviors for individuals with IDD. Also looking at the caregiver's perspective and support needs. And actually, I'm going to be addressing this first, which most people do not, and I'll talk about why. And then we're going to talk just very briefly and with a broad brush, what are the relevant and available state resources that can help? Okay. If you are on this journey, here are some, I'm going to repeat this in the beginning and at the end. We want to focus on self-care. Yes, I said that first at the very beginning, even before talking about the challenging behaviors, because as caregivers, it can be extremely difficult. We want to build a support team around us, and I'll talk about what that looks like. We want to look for and record patterns of behavior to identify any possible triggers. We'll also work with a team on a plan of action, keep data to track effectiveness, and I'll talk about some maybe simple ways you can do that. And then as much as you are comfortable with, know that there are state and community resources out there for you to connect with, that you're not in this alone. And then to evaluate the results of your efforts with your team. This doesn't have to be, again, complicated or sort of a business type meeting. It can be informal, but refine, adjust, and keep trying new approaches. All right. So in my journey, I found it with my sons. I have two sons that are both on the autism spectrum. They are adults. I found it helpful to understand and learn about a little bit about nervous system science. And this is, I know I'm a kind of a curious learner anyway, but I wanted to know a little bit more about my own nervous system, my son's nervous system, and could any of this be helpful in what we're going through? And I found the answer to be yes. So there's something, again, I'm not a licensed therapist, et cetera, but I do work with others, and I'm a part of a program called Chi for Two that helps develop and train self-care practices. So I've been a part of that for a couple of years, and I've learned about something called polyvagal theory. And polyvagal theory explains our nervous system functioning, basically how we process stress in the body, and was developed by a psychologist named Dr. Stephen Porges, about 10 or close to 15 years now ago. So I'm going to show you a graphic that helps me understand a little bit about what Dr. Porges is talking about in terms of polyvagal theory. So prior to this thought about polyvagal theory, if you look on the right, it was theorized that we basically have an on-off switch for stress. So, and this is built into us from our ancestors hundreds and thousands and millions of years ago as well. So it's good to think about this as survival mechanisms. So as we go into, we could possibly be in a shutdown phase here, which is kind of moving through molasses, feeling, it could be feeling depressed. It could be a rest period for us. And, say we are on the highway and a big truck moves in front of us, right? So we go into a bit of fight flight to survive, right? So it was thought that we're either stressed, we're in fight flight, or we're in shutdown. And we were moving back and forth. Dr. Porges theorizes that we have another system of activation. So it's not fight, flight, and shutdown only, but it's a social engagement system. We have this as another avenue. And again, we're doing all of this. Our nervous system is doing it subconsciously and based upon how it was modeled for us by our primary caregivers when we were babies and toddlers and infants. But he says that we have a social engagement avenue as well that our nervous system can go into, and that there is the ability to retrain that process. So social engagement system would be kind of like I'm talking to you today, you're talking to a friend, you're feeling joy, love, you're kind of in that state of safety. And then also it took me down another road about learning about something called co-regulation. And as mammals, we have the ability to take on the emotional state of another. So we're basically harmonizing with another person's nervous system. And in a family system, we live with a group of folks. It could be one person, others as well. we're all kind of harmonizing together. So all mammals co-regulate. And we read the state of other people by their facial expressions, language, etc. And if our bodies have been kind of hardwired to carry a lot of stress and trauma, we may be stuck in that pattern. And therefore, sometimes our offspring might take on some of those same habits. Is this to say any of this is our fault? Absolutely not. But it is to say it's important that we take care of ourselves first, that we practice self-care in whatever way, shape, or form on a regular basis so that we are more available when our offspring, sons and daughters, have one of these challenging behaviors or chronic challenging behaviors. So I encourage you as much as possible and at all costs to protect your health and emotions if you are supporting son, daughter, family member that is exhibiting challenging behaviors. This could mean associating with people that support you and really distancing yourself from anyone that sort of brings additional negativity into what already stressful time that you are going through. And that can be hard sometimes because everyone has an opinion, right? So again, I'm starting with caregivers. We haven't even started addressing the challenging behaviors of our family members. And I'm doing this for a reason. I want to express that, first of all, you are your best resource and that the self-care is one of the ways that you can dance with this behavior and survive and thrive. So as a caregiver, some of the things that I identified as red flags in myself is when I started taking the behavior personally. And that was a big red flag. Wow, I need some help. I need to talk to somebody. I need to, take a step back for a moment. Any changes in mood that you see or sleep patterns. If your irritability is increased, that's another red flag, something to pay attention to. And then emotional, physical exhaustion, of course, would be something that we want to take care of and take care of you. Other things, if you're, again, we talked about irritability, if you're in extreme anger, feeling out of control, again, it's triggering to you. Also, retelling the story or retelling your problem to people who can't help and telling it over and over again. Perhaps posting, and this again is my own opinion, posting every detail on social media or videoing your loved one in a state of distress. That would be a red flag. Withdrawal from your relationships, although sometimes that does happen, but intentional withdrawal from the people that love you. Physical symptoms we talked about, and of course, suicidal thoughts would be the biggest red flag that you need care and compassion. If that's something that you are needing, there are ways to find a good therapist. There are online searches. There are companies that provide this particular service. I encourage families to reach out to your primary care doctor, friend, pastor, priest, ask about evidence-based treatment. Will a therapist perhaps see you in an emergency? Will they do virtual or phone visits? And again, if you are struggling with some sleep disturbances or mood disturbances to the point where you're needing help, for you to please connect with your primary care physician or a psychiatrist. Okay. Thinking again about preserving you, because it's a lot of work for us that are primary caregivers, right? So I, again, want to encourage that you build a team around you. And so if you look at this picture, there is a group of men and looks like they're fiercely dedicated to each other, from my opinion, in their faces. They're all rowing in the same direction, and perhaps the waters aren't so smooth. So these are the types of people that you want to be a part of your team. And so you say, Rita, I'm all in this. There's a lot of energy. I don't have time to build a team. A team can start, or a team can be one person, but it's to build a team, create a contact list. This can also be another purpose for it, is who would you call in a crisis? But here are some potential members of your support team. Could be your direct support staff if you have someone in home, therapists, occupational speech language, behavior specialists, of course, if you're working with one, respite provider, your doctors, could be primary care, could be your psychiatrist, your case manager, other parents or family if they are helpful to you, right? And it also could be for you, a mental health provider for you or for your family member or both. Something else that I've also found helpful in this journey is creating a 1 to 2 page profile for your family member. And now, why would you do this? Because they're in building a team, we want people to get to know your sons and daughters and the strengths that they have, some of the challenges. A 1 to 2 page profile might also be helpful when you go to find a behavior therapist, any one of your professionals, a new doctor, a new psychiatrist, but keeping it short, so 1 to 2 pages, makes it more likely for people to be able to skim that. Could be, again, you're in an emergency situation and you've got to go to the hospital. This might be helpful in that situation. So here are some topics you might want to include in your 1 to 2 page profile. The likes that your son or daughter has, any types of food, snacks, allergies, things that they like to eat. Of course, important contact information, any medications that they're on, any safety concerns that individual experiences, any behavioral triggers, and we'll talk about that in just a little bit. Also thinking about updating it annually or as needed. As our sons and daughters become older, obviously they change just as we do. And so just picking a time, maybe every January or in their birth month, to just review it, and also review it with your son or daughter. You could say, am I getting this right? If that's available to them to communicate with you on this particular topic. Okay, so we're going to talk about understanding the source of challenging behaviors. Now, this is if there's any person that you work with in your team or as you're interviewing potential professionals to work with, if anyone says, oh, I can take care of this, we can cure this, it's going to be, I've done it before, et cetera, be very, very cautious, in my opinion, because this is most definitely a process. Sometimes we can hit it at the very, with some strategies that work initially. Sometimes they work for a period of time and then they don't work. So it's ever changing, right? Because sometimes the challenging behaviors can be chronic. And we all wish we had something to take the pain and suffering away. And sometimes it takes patience and some time. And as a family member, also some complex problem solving on your part. You're going to be working with some professionals that you trust in your team, right? And you are the subject matter expert for your son or daughter, right? So it's, again, just taking some time. Maybe you do that as we're talking today to really think about, is there anything that I'm missing here? What else might be happening that I have not considered? So there's 2 ways to think about this. We can think about preventing some of the behaviors, and we'll talk about what that might look like, and then also reacting to. So in that dance of the challenging behaviors and addressing them, there's kind of a 2-prong approach, right? So we want to try to prevent them, but then if they do occur, which they might, how can we handle it in that moment? Okay. So on the preventative side, here are some things to think about. And again, if you are a family member watching this, I encourage you to take out a piece of paper, take some notes. What part of this is relevant to you? So here are some possible behavior triggers. They may or may not be relevant for your son or daughter, but they are sort of broad categories of things that might be going on here. Okay, so sensory issues. So does your son or, for example, have a reaction and this is common, loud environments? Or is there particular lighting that also bothers them? Or is there, my son wears earplugs. He's been wearing them for probably over 10 years or so. So that is most definitely, I can tell there's a sound sensitivity there. There's a hyper acuity perhaps, and that's the way that is most comfortable for him. So loud noises, maybe it is a certain type of texture in the clothing or texture in the food, or touch. Sometimes our folks react to touch. So again, it's sort of thinking about this like a detective. I mean, in a way, we're kind of all Sherlock Holmes trying to figure this out. Um, so sensory is a large part of maybe what you might think about. Noise, lights, touch, texture, what might be at play here? Environment. So thinking again, this is a little bit related to sensory, but what type of environment does your son or daughter thrive in? What type of environment might trigger some behaviors? This can be challenging because we want our sons and daughters to be involved in community life, and some of the environments can be challenging and triggering to them. So, do they have a certain reaction when you take them to a day program or pick them up from a day program? Or again, it's really thinking about what's that environment in which they thrive in and they feel safe in. Thinking about next, medical. This is also a big one too. I would recommend connecting with a primary care physician, of course, if you suspect a medical concern. But a lot of times our folks are not able to tell us. Sometimes our folks don't have the communication ability. And so a person could be suffering from chronic headaches every day, but the behavior is the way that they're able to best communicate that to you. But we only look at the behavior piece, right? Around 18, 19, sometimes our wisdom teeth come in, right? Is if a person is not verbal, but they are expressing pain to you, it's worth taking a look. Is there another reason why they are expressing this type, expressing it in a challenging behavior, and they're just not able to say that to you? So things like earaches, GI issues. So again, kind of slowing down and thinking, my son is, say, for example, if your son or daughter is constipated, but is not able to tell you that, but is experiencing a lot of discomfort, so thinking about what might some of those medical issues perhaps be. And then again, connecting with that doctor for an assessment. And then something we really don't talk about at all or very often in our community, the disability community, I would say we're starting to, so I'll take that back. We're starting to, is this idea of trauma and how it affects our folks with developmental disabilities. So has there been a loss in the family? Has there, a death of a primary caregiver, a death of a, sibling or pet or a parent, and that individual is just not able to communicate that. And we'll talk about mental health in a moment, but it can be challenging finding a therapist that has the skills and experience in helping our loved ones through traumatic experiences. Were they ever abused in their childhood or adolescence? That's also something to be acutely aware of. Sometimes those behaviors or challenging behaviors could be a result of things that happened, yesterday, 5 years ago, et cetera, especially our folks on the autism spectrum who have perfect recall in their memory, right? Um, so again, kind of stepping back and questioning, is there something else here we might want to explore? Communication is also important, especially if our folks who are nonverbal, who are not able to communicate traditionally. There are facilitated communication devices and methods that are available now that might be helpful. But if I don't have the ability to communicate with you in a way that I think you understand, but I'm frustrated, that can certainly be a trigger for that individual, and you might see some challenging behavior in that respect as well. Also, weather, as this goes back to sensory a little bit. Barometric changes can cause things like headaches or severe changes in or shifts in weather, going from cold to hot, just like we're experiencing now in the Atlanta area, and hot to colder weather can cause things like migraines and headaches and other things to be aware of. So that's, as you are looking for what might be some of the causes, you could think about where's the pattern here? What am I seeing? Sleep disturbances. If our folks aren't getting adequate sleep or they're not able to, that most certainly, in my opinion, can cause some challenging behaviors. Imagine not sleeping for weeks at a time and how frustrating that might be. And then also a lack of structure. So as our folks go through school, there's a structure to their day, right? And when our folks graduate at 21, then that structure is gone. It's taken away. And if something is not put in its place, perhaps that might cause some stress for that person and some challenging behaviors or behaviors that come up for someone that has typically not expressed those before when they were in that school, secure, structured environment. And then we're going to talk just a little bit about co-occurring mental health diagnoses as well. Our folks with developmental disabilities are also vulnerable, just as the general population is too. So mental disorders may be diagnosed as a behavioral issue. So we want to also keep this in mind because there's two different ways of treating this, right? And so we want to, as much as we possibly can, try to figure this out with professionals. And when we do, we're able then to find more appropriate and effective interventions. So there's a mental health system that focuses on recovery from illness, and developmental disability, that system focuses on providing supports. And so as you can see, there are providing supports to achieve independent living, right? So those are two very different approaches. And sometimes those systems don't really talk to each other. So there are people with developmental disabilities that also have mental health challenges as well. Things like anxiety, social anxiety, general anxiety disorder, specific phobias, panic disorder, obsessive compulsive disorder, or post-traumatic stress disorder. Post-traumatic stress disorder, I got this from What is Mental Illness? And I think it's a really helpful slide, in my opinion, on what people think PTSD is and what it actually is. That idea of not being able to move on. But there's so much more to sort of unpeel that onion. of, it could be nightmares, could be sleep problems, self-destructive behaviors. So again, just stepping back and thinking, where might the origin be for my son or daughter's challenging behaviors? Sometimes medication might be helpful. Again, you're going to reach out to a qualified professional in this matter. The goal for medication, and we all want to help as much as possible, right? But the goal is to be alert and peaceful. So again, as we're thinking about keeping data or, tracking effectiveness as we can informally as family members, it's to be alert and peaceful. So if someone is sleeping too much, et cetera, or sleeping not enough, those are some of the things we want to report to our physicians on. There's a lot of trial and error here. It's a bit of a, from my experience working with professionals, it's a bit of a science and art combined, right? There are side effects to be aware of. And it's also important to, again, in whatever way, shape, or form you find helpful, to track the effectiveness, so then you can report to your medical professional and they can perhaps adjust or remove a medication that is not effective. Autism Speaks Medication Guide has a great toolkit. I believe they will ask you for your email address, but it does offer kind of a neutral perspective on what some of the medications are, what some of the side effects are, et cetera. So you might want to check that out. We're going to develop a plan, and this part can seem overwhelming a bit, depending on who you're working with. So if it is true behavior, you're working with a behavior specialist, you'll have a behavior intervention plan, perhaps if your son or daughter's still in school or outside of school, but it's basically a behavior intervention plan. If there's a medical issue, you'll have a plan of care. If it's trauma or mental health, we want to, as much as we can and are able, because this is a little tricky to find people that have experience in mental health and with people with developmental disabilities. And also, if relevant to you, a safety plan, which your behavior specialist can help with as well. In thinking about aggressive behaviors, we also want to consider the safety of your safety and the safety of everyone in your family. So you could consider inventorying some items in your home, things that perhaps could be used against you or to hurt you. This could also mean maybe having alarms on your doors and windows to alert you when those are opened. Sometimes our folks leave at times that is, not very safe. So we want to be alert to those situations. If you have weapons, to store those off site. Here's something else you also could do is introduce yourself to law enforcement in your area, and tell them a little bit about your son or daughter, so they have a little bit of a heads up on some of the needs and concerns of your family. And it certainly cannot hurt at all, in my opinion. And there's also something called Smart 911, and most of the cities and municipalities in the metro Atlanta area use this, but you can create a profile online. It's called Smart 911, and you can go ahead and describe who's in your family, what their potential diagnoses are or what they are, if that's something you're comfortable with. But again, if you have to call 911, a profile is already in the system for them to be able to access, and it gives people a little bit more information. Again, this is all based on your comfort level, especially on the introducing yourself to law enforcement and Smart 911. I think it has the potential for being very helpful. We also want to keep data when we can. I know that we're all overwhelmed as we go through this particular process of dancing and addressing challenging behaviors. You could keep it as simple as getting a composition notebook from the Dollar Tree and just writing a few sentences when a behavior occurs and the date. So it doesn't have to be pages and pages. And there's two reasons this could be helpful. Well, there's several reasons. One, as you have appointments with your team and you connect with your psychiatrist, behavior therapist, behavior specialist, etc., it's good information to have in front of you so that you can discuss and offer what's going on in the home and in the community. Also, as you apply for services as well. If you decide to apply for state funded or services or state services, it's a log of some of the challenges and needs that your son or daughter has. So those are two reasons right there. And then also a third reason would be it might give you an idea of, are there patterns here? A pattern might begin to emerge, right? If you keep data. Okay. Getting back to self-care is also to model and practice coping skills. And as you work with a behavior specialist, they're going to offer you, your son or daughter, some additional coping skills based on their needs and abilities. And I'm saying for you also to model and offer coping skills depending upon what you like to do and what your son or daughter likes to do. And as you develop a habit of giving yourself or utilizing coping skills, it's almost like adding deposits, emotional deposits to your emotional bank, right? So that when the situation does get really difficult, you've in a way sort of prepared for it because you're taking care of yourself. So here are some other things that you can participate in terms of, here's some ideas here for you. And then to also do it at a time where your son or daughter can see that too. So you're modeling those coping skills as well. Sometimes the situation becomes too much to handle on your own. Again, you are slowly building or quickly building, whichever one you can, a team to help you and your family member. A next step, if you need an additional assistance rather, you could apply for certain state resources to be able to get in-home or out-of-home supports. And then you could also work with your team, specifically your behavior specialist and your psychiatrist, to see if there are out-of-state placements, temporary, if that is appropriate for you. If things get to the level of this is very serious and we're all in jeopardy, then we want to explore things, and we want to explore them with professionals that have experience with these facilities, whether they're in Georgia or out of Georgia. So we're going to talk just a little bit about community resources, very high level here, because we could probably talk for at least another hour on this. So here in Georgia, we have the Georgia Department of Behavioral Health and Developmental Disabilities as the agency that provides those supports for individuals with developmental disabilities. We have Medicaid waivers. They're called the Now Comp that are a funding mechanism to be able to help individuals both in the community and at home. That's a very simplified way to explain it, but we don't have a lot of time. So just there are options for you, and you can navigate the system. Sometimes it's not, an instantaneous connection between you and services. Sometimes it takes a little bit of time and effort, but it certainly can be done. There are family support funding. It's a little bit easier to get. In Georgia, it's about $3,000 or so. There's the Georgia Crisis Response System, which I'll talk to you about in just a moment. There are state-funded respite services so that you could potentially take a break and for yourself and perhaps if you have a significant other or siblings, etc. There are state-funded day programs post-high school, and there's autism crisis services for those under the age of 21 as well. And there are for over the age of 21, but this is a specific program. The Georgia Crisis and Response System is called GCAL, and it is a potentially helpful to you, potentially. So I've heard many different things anecdotally. Sometimes I've heard that it's helpful. Sometimes I've heard that it really wasn't helpful. So I want to give you that information with that caveat. When would you call if your son or daughter is in a behavioral crisis that will not resolve or is escalating? So they're going to ask you basic demographic information and to describe the situation. If the crisis cannot be resolved telephonically, then a mobile crisis team will be dispatched to your home. And then GCAL may or will dispatch law enforcement if there is a history of physical aggression, unsecured weapons, or a safety issue. And the advice is, if you're in imminent danger, to call 911. Okay, I'm going to go through this a little bit quickly, but basically the crisis team is made up of several members that can provide support kind of on site, assess the situation, and then provide intensive in-home behavior support if needed. They can also provide links to other resources. Here's something, the response time I think has been reduced, but it can typically take between 60 minutes to 90 minutes for the mobile crisis team to get to your home. So that's also something to consider. In addition, there are autism-specific crisis homes for age 10 to 17. Again, these should be short-term situations. And then there's also autism stabilization units for age 10 to 14, short-term out-of-home behavior intervention and medication management. That's the purpose of the stabilization units. And yes, there are also adult crisis respite homes and services for those that are 18 and older. So a crisis team, again, if this is something that you think might be helpful, they're going to offer supports. They're going to contact others to be able to link resources to you. They're also mandated reporters. I like to tell folks that also ahead of time. And there is a developmental disabilities and behavioral health crisis teams. They're all blended under one vendor. So it's not only developmental disabilities or mental health. They're blended together in that crisis response system. Okay, so if there is recommendations for if the situation does not resolve and there are recommendations for an out-of-home placement, the average stay is 14 days. And this is, again, would be for your crisis respite homes. Children must be 9 years or older. And I've also heard that there are extenuating circumstances. Those stays can be longer as well. So again, another resource for you, maybe perhaps to think about. My recommendation, my personal opinion is to have that team of people that you can call, even if it's one or two people, to call if you are in crisis. But this is most certainly could help, and our tax dollars go to fund the Georgia Crisis Response System as well. So as we think about our plan, whatever the plan is, if it's a behavior plan, medication, a medical plan, to meet with your team on a regular basis. This doesn't have to be every week. It could be once a month, could be a little bit more if your family is in acute crisis. Report the results. What are you seeing at home? So again, keeping that open line of communication with you and your team and allowing them to help you too. That's another big thing, is really allowing people to help as much as they can. So that's why we have those team members. And refine and adjust the plan as needed. So people sometimes I want to know right this second what I can do. Again, this is based on personal experience. So feel free to use it or not use it. But try to slow down the situation. So a lot of times we say, calm down, calm down. And someone is, in that fight flight mode. You could talk about slowing things down, slowing down your speech, slowing down any sensory stimulation, redirecting the behavior. So talking about something different, engaging in a different activity when you start to see things escalate. Again, it's going to be all individualized to your son or daughter. There is no one way to do anything. Not taking this personally can be really hard. Especially as moms, right? And I think I'm going to guess that moms, and I've heard this many, many times, although I don't have any scientific evidence, that moms bear the brunt of a lot of the challenging behaviors. Thinking about your safety first. So when you see things escalate, going behind a locked door until things settle down, whatever that may look like in your situation, but thinking about your safety and the safety of your son or daughter too. Reducing any sensory stimulation when you see things begin to escalate, televisions, any noises, etc., that you can. Creating a kind of a sensory safe environment. These are some general strategies, although there are many, many, many more, and you will receive those when you connect with those professionals. And again, you're the subject matter for your son or daughter. Takeaways here, to focus on your self-care, learn about co-regulation, build a support team around yourself and your son or daughter, record any patterns of behavior to identify possible triggers, work with a team on a plan of action, keep data to track effectiveness, utilize state and community resources, ask for help, and then evaluate your results with the team, refine, adjust, just keep trying new things. And I believe we are at the end of our time. As a presenter, I will take any questions that you might have.
Thank you, Rita. We have a few questions that are coming in, and we do encourage other viewers, if you want, to put them in the chat or the Q&A box. So one of the questions is, in your presentation, you were talking about this was really a trial and error, trying to figure out what is the best solution for your family member. In your opinion, at what point do you stop trying something? Where we often know that adult children that have challenging behaviors might have difficulty doing new things. So where do you find that perfect spot, I guess, to know when is this a good time to change, or is this something you want to progress with?
And so is that on specific strategies or medication or both?
With strategies.
With strategies. Again, you're going to be working with a behavior specialist if it is true behavior, and you're going to be, I encourage you to take notes. So if you've tried something several times, and sometimes it may take, a few tries for something to work. So give it a good amount of time. It's hard for me to know. I don't want to give you a specific time, 3 days, a week, etc. But give it a little bit of time, and you will get some good feedback, I think, from the individual that you're supporting. So pay attention to their reaction. And it's, as you said, Amy, it can take time for folks to understand that we're trying something new here, right?
Right.
I don't think that answered that 100%, but give it a little bit of time.
Okay, good.
And record any reactions, and talk to your behavior specialist too.
Okay. Another question that came in is, what is the source for family support funding for ages 3 and older?
Okay, so there are family support providers. Those are nonprofit organizations that you would go through to, if you're interested in family support. There is on the DBHDD website, if you just Google, I wish I had the link to give you, DBHDD, there's a list of family support and just DBHDD family support. There are a list of providers that you can reach out to depending upon the part of the state that you live in. And so I would connect with those folks. Again, it's a little bit easier to get family support than a larger now comp waiver.
Okay. Another question is, what are some respite care options here in the Metro Atlanta or Georgia that are provided by private or public organizations?
Right. So there's a couple of ways that you can investigate that. Again, there is state-funded respite in addition to that family support that you could potentially access. There are large organizations that provide respite support. There are small organizations that provide respite support. What you could do is contact Parent to Parent of Georgia or look on their website, or you could contact them and say, I'd like a list of the organizations that provide respite in my area. And then you could start your search that way. That's one way to start.
Okay. As a follow-up question with the respite care, is anything determined on your family's income about how much respite care you can receive?
On respite care, I'm not certain of that. I don't think so, but I'm not 100% certain on that. Yeah, I need to do some checking. So if you want to email me, I can do a little search on my end. I don't think so, but I could be wrong on that. So I'd need to double check.
Okay. So a question that just came in, how does one find a behavior therapist?
So a behavior specialist, that is someone that is qualified to work with individuals with developmental disabilities to help you develop a plan, a behavior intervention plan. One way you can find a behavior specialist is to ask any other family members who are they using. So you could go through referrals. That might be one way to do that. You can also, again, go to that parent to parent website and do a search on their database. That's another way to find it. But if you have a friend that uses someone that they absolutely love, again, that certainly goes a long way in my book. So if you can get a personal referral, great. And you could start and get a list again from the parent-to-parent database and start calling some and see who you resonate with, ask them some questions, tell them a little bit about your family member and ask their experience level, who they primarily work with, the length of time that they've been working in Georgia. So do your due diligence, in other words.
So Rita, we want to thank you again for taking time on your busy schedule to share this very valuable and practical tips for our caregivers. And we look forward to speaking with you maybe on another topic about this. So thank you again. And we look forward to our next presentation with you.
Thank you, Amy, and thank you, everyone. It's been my pleasure.